when World War II was declared, my brother was an accountant in the National Bank in Stanthorpe, and he joined up and departed Australia in 1940, and I had just left school, and as he was in the armed forces, I wanted to do my bit as well. And my brother said to me, if you go and join up, you will get 6 shillings a day. But if you work for a bank, as I did, as he did, he said, your wage will probably be 21 shillings a day, and the bank will make up the pay. So I joined the Bank of New South Wales, and they posted me out to Dirranbandi. And I made a lot of good mates there, and when the recruiting train came round to Dirranbandi, which was the end of the railway line, we all went down and signed up. But the Air Force put you on a reserve list, which they did with me. My other mates joined the army and they were up and away, but I was left, and it wasn't until about a year later that I was called up. And it was 1942 before I joined the Air Force. I was always mechanically inclined and very interested. I had a great love of machines because I thought really they would probably be more reliable than people. You could ask a lot of them and they'd just do it. And the Air Force had already shown, the 1940 battles and the Battle of Britain were pretty inspiring stuff. So I thought it'd be wonderful to be able to participate in that kind of activity. Well, we went by ship to Wellington in New Zealand and picked up some more Kiwis, and then across the Pacific to San Francisco. I always remember walking through the, as we came off the wharf, there was a caption over the gateway, and it said, "Through these portals pass the finest fighting men in the world." Well, the Aussies all said, "How did you know we were coming?" and asked various questions of the locals, so we enjoyed that. No, not much. We were put on a train and sent the northern route up through Wyoming and Utah and then into Colorado and across Northern America to Camp Miles Standish in Massachusetts. So the Americans were just so welcoming and, really lovely people. I remember the train stopped at a little place called Salida in Colorado, and I remember they had a great tall mountain up behind the village, and an old fella came up and he peered at my shoulder flash, which had Australia, and he peered at that and he said, "Australia." And he leant back and he said, "Say, which part of the States are you fellas from?" So, some of the Americans had a bit to learn about geography, I think. Well, we played cards and peered out at the ever-changing scenery. It was winter and it was, it was really very cold. And the wonderful trains, the Pullman trains were all heated, so we lived in great comfort. Well, being winter, there wasn't a lot, that visible in the farmland. A lot of it was snow covered, all through the, Utah, the Wasatch Ranges, and then we went along, I remember, the Colorado River, and we were going along beside the river. The railway line was up above, like on a ledge, with the river flowing down here. And at one stage went through this Royal Gorge Canyon, and the bridge over was 1,000 feet up above the railway line. It was quite spectacular. We had nothing like that in Australia, but they were sights that you would never forget. I went on, we were given leave, and I went to New York with another fellow, and we did over all the nightclubs. All the ones that were famous at the time. There was one called the Top Hat, and the Stork Club, and at the Rio Bamba, the Andrews sisters were performing, and we went to the Rio Bamba, and I had an unforgettable experience there when, having watched the three sisters performing, singing their songs that were favourites at the time, like the Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy of Company B and Rum and Coca-Cola songs. They belted them out, in fine style. But anyway, while we were sitting at our table, Patty Andrews came over and she said, "Oh, you Aussie boys, look, come over and meet my sisters." So we went over and met Maxine and Laverne, and we had drinks with them and a great conversation, and they were really great, lovely people, who really looked after us, and needn't have wasted their time with us, but I appreciated the fact that they did and displayed interest in what we were up to. So that was one I'll never forget. Finally, the relaxation ran out, and we were posted to catch a ship up in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So we travelled by train up to there, and we embarked on the Queen Elizabeth. And we were not alone, because there were 20-odd thousand American troops also embarked. And so that we had to have our meals on the 3-day journey racing across the Atlantic. We had to have our meals in a rotation system. That's the only way they could feed everybody. It went so fast, it went over 40 miles an hour, and it was unescorted, and only at one stage we did a left-hand turn and threw everybody off balance, and it was obviously a submarine scare, but they did a left-hand turn and shot off somewhere. But we finally came down from Iceland and over down into Greenock in Scotland. But we never really saw anything else except the limitless ocean. We were trained on single-engine aircraft, and Britain by then had air superiority because its fighter command was so efficient and had built up in such numbers that they didn't need any fighter pilots. And that's what the delay was. However, in the end, there was an insatiable demand for bomber pilots, and in the end, they realised that the best source was from ex-fighter pilots and retrain them onto twin and multi-engines. And that's what's happened to me. I received a posting to South Cerney and then in the Cotswold Hills, and then to a satellite aerodrome called Byberry. And I was posted to what's called an OTU, operational training unit at Moreton in the Marsh on flying Wellington. So we had to learn to fly a big lumber in Wellington, which I really enjoyed. It was a lovely old aircraft. And that's when we crewed up. We got, there were 6 of us. We got a couple of gunners and a bomb aimer and a navigator and so on. So we were sort of put in a big hall and just milled around, and you'd sort of, look at each other. There were various categories of gunners and navigators and so on. And you'd like a look of a fellow, say, "Oh, are you crewed up?" And he'd say no, and I'd say, "Oh, well, you want to try your luck with us?" He'd say, and that's how we all got together as a crew. So anyway, that seemed to work out. That's how the whole RAF got its crews together. They let them choose each other. But anyway, I think it was a success because I had no problems with my crew. They were quite good. So from there, we then went to a conversion unit to learn to fly multi-engines. So we went to this place called Wickhall, and there we acquired another crew member called a flight engineer, because on 4 engines they decided that the pilot had his hands a bit full to do it all himself, so they provided a flight engineer. He could do all the tank changes, like, for example, in the Halifax there were 16 fuel tanks, and they had to be changed in order to avoid an airlock, which would stop the engines. They had to be switched over in a certain sequence. So that was the job of the flight engineer, to learn the proper sequence for changes of fuel. They always used the outermost tanks and work their way into the fuselage to get rid of the fuel. And from Con Unit, we were posted to our first squadron, which was, mine was 76 Squadron, RAF, at a place called Home on Spalding Moor in North Yorkshire. And that was a real eye-opener, because this was a squadron in which Leonard Cheshire, who was the most decorated airman of the war, he did his first tour of operations in Whitley bombers, and then later became the CO of 76. It was a squadron that had great tradition, and the CO at the time was just one of those wonderful English gentlemen. His name was Wing Commander Hank Iverson. And when we reported to him that we had arrived on his squadron, I knocked on the door, and a voice said, "Come in." And we went in and we were greeted with a pair of flying boots up on a desk. And this bloke is leaning back in his chair with his hat on the back of his head, and he leans forward. He says, "Oh, come in, chaps." Puts his feet on the floor, and he stood up and he greeted all 7 of us. And he said, now, take a seat, boys." He said, "I'll tell you, how we operate here." He said, "It's pretty isolated." So he said, "The first thing we'll give you is a bicycle to get around, because we're quite dispersed and there's a long way between the mess and your sleeping quarters and so on." And he said, "Now, there are certain rules that I've installed here. Now, saluting." He said, "This is an old RAF tradition," but he said, "After midday, I've banned it. You can salute in the morning if you encounter an officer," but he said, "in the afternoon, just ignore them," he said. And then he said, "Dress comfortably." He said, "I prefer my big roll neck jumper," and he said, "I think you would enjoy comfortable clothing as well." So he said, "Don't feel you've got to have your tie on and be regimentally dressed." So this sounded, as a happy introduction to 76 Squadron. And sure enough, when it came to operating, in the briefing room, the blind would go up, revealing the target, and Wing Commander Iverson would say, "Now, it's not good news tonight, chaps. We're going to Dusseldorf or Frankfurt or somewhere deep in Germany." And he said, very, very tough opposition. And he said, "I'll be leading A flight, and Squadron Leader Bridgman, he'll be leading B flight." So he said, "But, I hope we all meet afterwards and we all have a good trip." Now, and then a few nights later, we'd have an operation which was to a flying bomb site, which was only across the channel into France and back again. It was only a 3.5-hour trip instead of 6 hours. And obviously, over to France and back, you've got a better chance of survival than going deep into Germany. And sure enough, Wing Commander Iverson would say, "Well, now, chaps, you should have a good night tonight. It shouldn't be a lot of trouble." And he said, "Squadron Leader Oxenham, he'll be leading A flight, and Squadron Leader Bridgman by B flight." And he said, "And I'll be here when you get back." And that's how he was. On the hard trips, he would lead. And on the easier trips, he would wave us goodbye. He was that kind of bloke. We really loved and respected him. So there were already 3 Australian squadrons down in Lincolnshire flying Lancasters. And we were all flying the Halifax 3. The Halifax 2 was really a quite different aircraft from the Halifax 3. Halifax 3 was redesigned, the tail was redesigned, the engines were re-engined. Instead of 1,200 horsepower Merlins, we had 1,750 horsepower radial Hercules, Bristol Hercules engines, which transformed the aeroplane. We regarded them as a far safer aeroplane to fly than a Lancaster. The disadvantage with the Halifax was that the main spar of the Halifax ran right through the middle of the bomb bay, and that meant that the bomb bay could not carry giant bombs such as the Lancaster could carry, like the 12,000 pounder, which was a very long bomb and could fit in a Lancaster bomb bay, because the poor old Lancaster had the main spar up in the fuselage, and that main spar often became a death trap to the crews trying to go from one end of the aircraft to the other and negotiate this great high spar in the middle of across the fuselage. But anyway, Lancaster fellas were so loyal to their aeroplane, and which they enjoyed, good on them. So they didn't mind this impediment. But in the Halifax, we had no such problem. You could walk full length from one end of the fuselage to the other. When we arrived at 466 Squadron, or Driffield, which had 466 already there and 462 being formed, there was an Australian CO, and his name was Group Captain Forsyth. And apparently his record of service was he'd done about a dozen trips out here in the Pacific, and he got kicked upstairs to be in command of this squadron in England. Well, he lined us up and he said, right, now, stand to attention. And he said, I'll let you know how we run the squadron. And it was, we'd have MO's inspection every week, and make sure your boots were beside the bed and you had your tie on and you always saluted officers. And could we have a push bike? Certainly not, you'll walk. We didn't mind because we were operating, and it was a very intensive. In fact, moving from one squadron to another, I completed my first tour of operations of 30 trips in 3 months. We just seemed to be, either operating or sleeping, and that was it. Our heads were kept down, and that was life. But I completed 30 trips. I had a few adventures in that. We got beaten up by a night fighter, and we managed to escape from that. We came back on 3 engines on a couple of occasions. We had to land away at the emergency drone at Woodbridge, which has what's called FIDO, that's fog dispersal, and the runways at the 3 emergency drones at Manston, Woodbridge and Carnaby, the runways were 3 miles long, and they had grass and tarmac or concrete, and then grass again, so that anybody that came in with no hydraulics and no brakes, they could land on the grass and they'd pull up quicker. And if the undercarriage collapsed, there was less likelihood of a fire starting on grass than on concrete. So that was the purpose of those aerodromes. And also they were able, with the series of kerosene lit flares, to create such conversion of the moisture-laden atmosphere that they would disperse the fog so you could see the runway and come in and land. I remember at one stage when the attack was seen to be aborted, we were running up on the target and the bomb aimer had taken over, as he does on the run up to the what's called the bombing run. The bomb aimer gives instructions to the pilot. He says, you know, steady, left a bit, steady, you know, right, steady, hold it steady. And he's got control of the aircraft. And the rear gunner says to me, oh, Skipper, the enemy aircraft is about 1,000 yards to the rear up, port quarter up high, prepare to corkscrew starboard. So at the same time, the flight engineer standing behind me was looking up and he says, oh, Skipper, there's an aircraft directly above. He said, I'm looking into his bomb bay. I can see the Cookie, which is a 4,000-pound bomb. He said, you know, you want to move away from him? And the bomb aimer is saying, steady, steady, hold it steady. And the rear gunner is saying, prepare to corkscrew starboard. So it's one of those occasions when you have to make a decision. And on that occasion, I thought, bugger the bomb aimer, we're going to ruin the bombing photo and the bomb is going to go somewhere else. And I rammed on the starboard rudder and skidded away, and at the same time the Cookie came and it went between the wing and the fuselage. I could have touched it, and it went wibble wobble like that down, and that got rid of that. But my skidding turned away, and then I came back on the target, and by then the rear gunner said, no, he's broken away to port, Skipper. I'll keep an eye on him. So on that occasion we got away with it. But when we had a combat, you know, he came in from about 800 yards and opened fire, and the rear gunner says, you know, corkscrew starboard, so over I go, and what you do, you peel off and dive, and the aim is that when he is shooting, by then you're going to be lower and off course, and he will not have allowed for that alteration of course. But as you need to resume your journey, you've got to, when you've dropped 500 feet, you wheel over and pull the stick back and regain your height again, and then resume your course again. And you keep doing that with instructions from the gunners as to what the fighter is doing. The moment he lines up and comes within, say, 400 or 500 yards, it's time to go and just put his aim off. And you just keep corkscrewing until he gets sick of you and picks someone else. When we finished our first tour, we were asked, due to crew shortage, would we volunteer to do an extra 5 trips? And that would give the squadron time for newcomers to come in. So we got together and said, oh, look, it's always other people that get shot down, it's not us. So we volunteered to do the extra 5 trips. And on the third one of those, we were shot down, but we were shot down by what was called the Saraga music, which was something that we never knew anything about. The Germans had a twin-engine fighter with upward-firing cannon, and they would come in below in your blind spot where it was impossible to see them and give you a 3-second burst into an engine which was sure to set fire to your aircraft. And then they would move on to the next one. And I heard a German night fighter pilot interviewed after the war, and he said, on one night, I shot down 7 4-engine bombers in 19 minutes. And he said, I just would set one on fire and move on to the next one. He said, you know, you couldn't go wrong. So that was how we came to our sticky end. But as a night fighter, they were very good. And once they equipped them with these upward firing cannon, you know, they had a wonderful life. You know, most of the casualties of Bomber Command really would have ended up as victims of Saraga music, because many blokes who were shot down thought it was flat, because all they knew, the first thing they knew was they're on fire and a few bullets are flying past them. Well, that would have been, like, some would have gone into the aircraft and some would have gone, you know, between the wings or out through the other side. So fellas had never heard of Saraga music, and they would have put it down to flak. But I think most of it was Saraga music. Once, on the third trip, which was to Dusseldorf, we had just bombed and we just turned off the target, and the next thing, all hell, the starboard inner engine just erupted in flames. And the flame and the fuel lines were severed, and the fuel caught fire, and the whole wing was on fire. So I bailed out the crew, said, you know, bail out. So we all bailed out, and as I went down the hatch to the front hatch, and luckily the bomb aimer and the flight engineer had done the right thing. They had pulled up the hatch and put it up in the nose. And in our drills, we always stressed, I always said to them, when you pull up that hatch, if you've ever got to, put it in the nose. Don't try and put it out the hole, because quite a number of fellas would pull up the hatch and then try and put it through, and the airstream would grab it and lock it into the hatchway, and they were trapped. They couldn't get out, and there was no time to run back and get out the rear hatch.
Oh my God.
So I was very lucky, again, that my crew had done the right thing. They'd remembered their training, and they'd put the hatch up. I noticed the hatch up in the nose. So I went up into the nose and faced aft and dropped my legs through and dropped down. And then I remember pulling the ripcord, and I looked at the bit of wire at the end of this D-ring, and I was sort of over and over, and then finally drifting down. For a while, the moon was shining on the Rhine. I thought, Jesus, the Rhine is about a mile wide. I thought, I'm gonna land in the Rhine, but anyway, I landed on the West Bank, luckily. I drifted in under, you know, those big pylons with power lines? I drifted in. How lucky can you be? Instead of landing on them, I drifted in underneath, and it was in a field of mangoes, those big turnip things. So I pulled the chute off, and I bundled up, and I pulled up one of these big mangoes and put the chute in and put the mangoes back on top again. And then I got there and I cut off my insignia, and I started running to the west. So the first thing, in a backyard of a house, there was some clothes hanging out to dry. So I borrowed a jacket. It was a brown jacket, and I put that on over my navy blue battle dress jacket. So now I had navy blue trousers and a brown jacket, and I was a foreign worker. I was immediately disguised, so that was a bit of luck that I came upon that. Well, the locals were busy fighting the fires, and I just kept heading west away from all the activity. And, you know, there were roads I had to cross, and I would sort of wait until the traffic got, and then I'd nip across. And I kept away from people. I didn't want to have any conversations with anybody. So, you know, I went on. Look, this went on for about 4 days. And on one occasion, a village, firstly, one night I was there, and I see this farmer come out, and I thought, I don't think I can get any help here. I think they're all German, these people, so I don't want to talk to any of them. When I got near the front line, I had to swim this. I don't know what it was. I thought it might have been the Raw River, but it may not have been. Must have been a tributary. But I had to take my boots off and put them around my neck, and swim over this river. It would have only been, from here to that wall wide, but you couldn't wade over, so I had to sort of swim over, and then dry myself in and put my boots on and get going. And one occasion I got a bit of a fright. I came to this, it was a five-bar fence. Right, I'm heading west and southwest as best I can, and I'm confronted with this fence. I walked along the fence for a few hundred yards, this way and that way, and there was nowhere out. And I looked, it had a notice up. It had Achtung Minen, minefield. So I thought, well, I don't know. I can't go. I'm not going to keep going at right angles to the way I've got to go, either that way or that way. I've got to go this way. So I thought, oh, bugger it. Maybe it's an old minefield or something. So I got down and I crawled under the barbed wire, and I kind of tipped through this area, but I never got blown up. I was lucky again. I could hear this artillery firing. I kept going, and I came to this village, and I walked round the corner, and I came face to face with two German soldiers. They have their rifles slung. And one bloke just opened his mouth and I think he said, you know, oh, he looked at me and he said, I said, News been Ausländer. And at that stage, two lightnings flew over the village with this deafening roar, and everybody took off. And I ran in the opposite direction to the soldiers. I thought, I don't want to continue this conversation. And I took off. And these other fellows, and there were a couple of villages around, everybody flew out. And these lightnings, the next thing, they loosed off rockets. They had rockets under their wings. And later I found that they were shooting at tanks. And I came upon a tank, I don't know, it was an hour or two later, but anyway, I came on this tank that had been knocked out. It had bodies there and there was submachine guns lying around and so on. And I looked at all this mess and thought, I don't want to get involved in this, I'll keep going. And I came on this, where these Germans have these artillery pieces, probably 88 millimeters, and they're shooting in that direction, which was the direction I wanted to go. And I thought, well, wherever they're pointing, that's where I got to be. I got to be there. So I went off down this road, and I started proceeding along the road, and the next thing, machine gun fire is stitching the road. Was a concrete road, and the bullets are flying off that. So by then I'm in the table drain, face down, and every time I'd sort of progress forward, with my backside stuck up, they'd stitch the bank. I thought, this is a really unfriendly place here. This is bad news. So I thought, well, I can't stay here. I've got to keep going. And the only way I could keep going is along this table drain. And I went a few hundred yards, and I came to, there's a dead German lying in the drain. And he's at the foot of a telephone pole. And I don't know whether he cut the wires or what he'd be doing up there. Anyway, he was dead down here. And I thought, well, Jesus, I can't go around. There's no room to go around him. So I had to go over him. So we got acquainted, and I quickly, like somersaulted over him, and my mates switched the bank again. So I was kept urging on by this machine gun that was pretty unfriendly, and I kept thinking, if I stay here, they'll come out and get me, right? And I'm not keen on that. I've got to keep going. So I kept going, and in the end, I kept going until the German shells were landing and kicking up dirt. And I thought, this is the end of the road. I can't go any further. So I lay there and sort of thought about things, and I thought, right, what am I going to do? At night time, they won't see me, they won't, no good in coming around looking for me in the dark. They won't do that. I'll get going. And then I thought, yeah, but if I get going in the dark, and I'm going where I hope my friends are, it'll be shoot first and ask questions later. So I thought, look, while there's light, I've got to get going. After a lull there used to be about a 15 or 20-second lull in the artillery fire. I got up in a lull, and I got up on the road, and I opened up the jacket, and I put my hands up, and I belted along the road. I went for a couple of 100 yards, and a voice behind me said, "Halt!" Now, I turned around, and there's a little American GI with his carbine pointed at me. And I went up to him and I said, "I'm an Australian airman, take me to an officer." He said, "Strellan, where are you? Strellan." Oh, I said, "Australian." He said, "March." So I marched, and they took me to a little old shed in an orchard, and there was a captain and a major there, and the captain says, "What have you got here, Corporal?" And he says, "I don't know." He says, "Some bloke," he says, "he's Strellan. Strellan, I don't know what that is." Strellan. And I said, "I'm Australian." And the captain says, "Oh, Australia, right." He said, "You got any identification?" And I said, "I got my dog tags." I produced me dog tags. He said, "Well," he said, "I think you look all right to me." "Right, leave him with me, Corporal, you can go." So the corporal went off, and the captain says, "Could you use a drink?" And I could, by then I could use a drink. And anyway, he opened up this black trunk he had, an old tin trunk, and he got out, I'll never forget, a bottle of black and white whiskey. It had a little black dog and a white little Scotch Terrier dogs on it, you see. And he pours a shot into a pannikin and he says, "Get that in here." Well, I'd never had whiskey before, so I choked it down, and I felt a bit better after that. But anyway, he said, "Well, now we're going to send you off to the intelligence people. They'll interrogate you and find out all about you and see what you can tell us of what's going on." And I said, "Well, who are you? What mob are you?" And he said, "We're General Simpson's 9th Army." And he said, "We're waiting to be the first army across the Rhine." Well, the first thing they did, they put me with some officers, the major and the captain. They went down into Aachen, which had just been liberated, and it was an absolute wreck. Aachen was just, there didn't seem to be one building standing. It was just all walls and ruins. And they had these American officers were in a Kubelwagen, in which I'd never seen one before, and it went down into the river, and he propeller had a shaft propeller out the back, and they just progressed across the river, and then he pulls it out again, pulls it with a four-wheel drive, and it just climbed up the bank, and away we went. Marvellous bit of gear, an amphibious jeep. But anyway, then they transferred me, they gave me an ordinary American jeep and a big black driver, and he drove me westward through Liège and to Namur, and delivered me to the British. And the British officer said, "Now my name is Colonel Bonham Carter." He said, "Now what will you do? He said, I want to interrogate you and see what information you've got. And then he said, we'll get you to Brussels, which has just been liberated. So this they did. They drove me to Brussels, and I went into a intelligence office there, and also in that office was a Belgian paratrooper, and I said to him, where have you come from? He said, I've come from Arnhem. He said, I was in Operation Market Garden, where General Montgomery, is one of his failed operations. He dropped 15,000 paratroopers to take the Rhine bridges, and of course he didn't inform the paratroopers that waiting for them was a Panzer division of tanks who had just come back and were resting after being on the Russian front. So they were there to greet these paratroopers. So no wonder the Arnhem Bridge operation was a complete schmozzle. And this paratrooper was one of them. He'd escaped westward. Obviously, he had a bit of help with the locals. Anyway, from Brussels, then they said, well, we liberated Antwerp yesterday. We'll take you to Antwerp. We can get an aircraft to fly you back to Britain. So they dumped me at Antwerp, and I got on a Dakota and flew back to Northolt in Britain, and I was claimed by the British intelligence at St John's Wood. So I ended up there. The Speaker's Secretary of the House of Commons was a bloke called Sir Ralph Fernie, and his job is to run the House of Commons. He allocates the time that it'll operate. He arranges, the seating and the cleaning and the provisioning of it. Everything to do with the running of the House of Commons. And they weren't relations, but they were good friends. The Newtons had advised Sir Ralph Fernie that I was over there and a friend of the family and to look after me. And he was really marvellous. During my career, he took me to lunch at the Travellers Club, and I was appalled, to have lunch, because he was a civilian, just being the Secretary and the Speaker of the House of Commons. He was in a civilian suit. I was just a dirty old Australian flight sergeant. And at the next table was Lord Portal, the chief of the RAF. Sir Ralph Fernie then said to me, look, would you like to see the House in session? And I said, oh, that'd be wonderful. And so he gave me a chit, which I had somewhere. I got it here still. And it was a chit to the Distinguished Strangers Gallery, which is like a mezzanine floor overlooking the House of Commons. So I'm up there on my own. There's no one else there, just me. And I'm looking down, sitting forward, and Churchill is there, and Anthony Eden is right behind him, and Lady Astor is there, and Attlee and the Labor Party along on this side. and they're talking about the casualties in Greece and the Greece and Crete operation, and how there were 27,000 British captured and 9,000 Australian troops captured. I just remember those sort of figures that he quoted at the time.